Good morning. Wherever you are in the world, good morning and welcome to today's Cichlids and coffee. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a cup of your favorite beverage, whatever that might be, coffee, tea, or whatever. And I see we have a good group in here this morning, and more are getting on. Let's see here. Shane Cowger over in Motor City, which I'm assuming is Detroit. And Shane, first on the chat, if you'd like some stickers, if you'd like some of these stickers, I've got these cool stickers. Here's the Cichlids and Coffee logo, and Vinny's design for my light, and of course this one that I did recently. If you'd like some stickers, just go ahead and send me your address to ben.o.cichlid@gmail. And thank you for being the early bird today. And Fishman Marcus, good morning to you. Hey, GP, glad you're here, my friend. I will be talking about something you and I discussed yesterday. And hey, Denny. Denny of Denny's Aquatics, Dennis Rudell, is here, who has just relocated from Chicago to Oak Ridge, Tennessee. So, Denny, welcome to my new beautiful state of Tennessee, and I am loving it down here. And it looks like we have 48 folks on, according to my statistics, my analytics. Hello, Richard Maloney, and Iman Fountain. Hello, Iman, and Kjell Slivest Overgaard. Hello, Denmark. Hello, Denmark. I'm glad you're here. And Stroke on Trent in England. Hi, Wayne. I'm glad you're here, my friend. And Chevy Fish, Sashin Bohor, is that how it's pronounced? And Elijah. Hey, Elijah. You've got something coming in the mail, and you know what it is. And let's see here. Cat Sailor, yes. Hey, Cat Sailor. Always good to see you. And GP, yes. Solar King Ronnie. Hey, Solar King Ronnie. Good to see you. And Mary Page. Hey, Mary Page. And Mary Page, you bring up a good point with Mother's Day. If you folks hear some barking and some talking and some noise, I have all of my kids in town. All four of them are in town for Mother's Day, and two of them flew in from the different corners of the country. So there's a little chaos in the kitchen, which is the door right above the fish room. And one of them brought their dog, and so they're having a fun time with my dog. So with my dogs, so you might hear some noise during the live stream. So let's go ahead and officially get this underway. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that sub, hit that bell, hit that notification. That tells YouTube that something good is going on here, and it will encourage YouTube to suggest the channel to other fish keepers. Much appreciated when you do that. Some of you have asked for ways to support the channel, and of course the best way is you being here and participating. That's the best way. Cost you nothing. And but also, if you want to go take it a step further, you can go to Amazon and pick up T-shirts and coffee mugs and all kinds of good stuff. And also, go to Teespring. Go to Teespring and pick up coffee mugs and T-shirts, or use the Amazon link to buy things on Amazon, whether it's fish related or anything on Amazon. Doesn't increase your price, and it gives a little bit to the channel. So some great ways to support the channel if you would like to. No pressure. No pressure at all. So give me a little feedback here on the comments. How's the picture and the sound? Can someone give me a picture and sound check? Let's see here. Hey, Marcus from London. How you doing? Michael from the UK. Hey, Terry. Good to see Terry Spelling here. How's the sound? Give me a sound check. And how's the video and the sound? Is it okay? Are we good? And yes, you're right, GP. Candi is in the middle of moving, so we're not going to have Candi probably for a few weeks. Somebody says looks good and clear. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. Always something, live streamer's nightmare is when they have technical difficulties. And over the years, I've had my share. So we have an interesting topic today that I want to go ahead and jump into with you. And yes, you're right. A lot of Brits here today. And it's funny, the U.S. is of course the number one, and in the U.S., New York is the number one location, interestingly enough, for folks that subscribe and follow the channel. And then we have the U.K. and Australia, and then I believe Canada's up there, but certainly there's a strong presence in the U.K., which is very appreciated. So let's go and, hey, Rocky, good to see you. So let's get into this subject, and it was based to a large degree on a survey that was conducted, and the survey had some interesting results. And I was thinking about the subject, and I said, let me throw out a survey and see what comes up. Now I'm going to add a lot. I'm going to add some points to the survey results. I'm not just going to talk to you about the survey. I've got a lot of other stuff to cover related to this topic, which has to do with why people leave the hobby, and which is, it's not good. It's not good when you're talking to somebody and they say, hey, look, I put my tank on Craigslist, or I just gave my stuff away, or my stuff is sitting in the garage and I never got back into it. And for someone like myself that has a purpose of growing the hobby and introducing people to the hobby and helping people be successful in the hobby, some of the worst things I can hear is I decided to leave the hobby. Now, sometimes the reasons are legitimate, and certainly fish dying off. The fish die off one, and that one has a lot of moving parts because there can be a lot of reasons for it. And some of you have probably experienced fish die off. Certainly anything I talk about today, comment in the chat or comment under the video if you're watching the replay, because we all learn from each other, right? I mean, that is a one of the mottos of this channel. But probably for me, and maybe you feel this way, when there's a fish die off and you don't know why, you're stuck with that mystery of why did that fish die. That one can throw you for a loop because you have no answer. You have no why did he die? What was the reason? Was it disease? If it was disease, how come the other fish are healthy? And so the mystery of a die-off, or maybe you have a complete tank die-off and you never figure out why. If it was after a water change, you could probably imagine, I must have made a mistake. I didn't add. There was a combination of the city adding extra chlorine or chloramine and me forgetting to add the conditioner, or maybe the temperature. Maybe somebody started the dishwasher or the washing machine when I was filling the tank, and the water got super hot because of temperature change, and I ended up boiling my fish, or something happened. And if there's a water change, you can kind of go, well, it was probably the water change, a mistake in that process. And but very often you're left with a complete mystery. Probably the biggest mystery that would seem to me would occur is something like colomaris. Colomaris is a disease that can present itself in different ways. It can attack the internal organs of the fish, and the fish just plops over and dies. And you're looking at the fish and going, there's no outward signs. Other times it can create a white streak from the back of the dorsal down the body. They call it, I think, a dorsal or a saddle marking, and you can get fuzz, what looks like velvet or fungus in the lips. The fins start to rot, and so you're treating for fungus, you're treating for velvet, you're treating for and colomaris will just creep on and on, and So that one is a tricky one. Oxygen is a tricky one because oxygen problems in your tank. Let's say you raise the temperature, you're fighting ick, but you didn't put an air stone in, and so you raise the temperature to, gradually to 85 degrees, but you have the same amount of water movement going on, and surface tension breakup, and there's a lack of oxygen. You can't get that dissolved oxygen in the water, and your fish start dying off one at a time until you have the number of fish that the available oxygen can support. So you don't get it. You're like, I don't understand. My two biggest fish died, and now I'm left with these fish. So, but now these fish seem okay, and you'll be okay. And then you lower the temperature later because the ick goes away, and you never quite figure it out. All you know is you lost two big fish, and so oxygen is a real tricky one, and it's particularly hard. And I heard this in the comments under the survey. There was a good number of comments, and I think if I can read it right, I think there were about 800 people responded. That's a good sample. I mean, 800 fish keepers. That's a pretty good sample of fish keepers. And one of them commented that it's particularly difficult when you have a fish that you're very attached to. Let's say someone like Murphy over at the aquarium co-op. This is basically the mascot of the tank. I mean, the mascot of the store. Large puffer fish. All of a sudden, this fish tips over and dies, and Corey is out of town or is beside himself because he can't figure out why. That would be a bit devastating. I mean, these fish are they're like your friend. I've developed this attachment to that large green tear, that orange som that I picked up. He's just this big, lumbering sort of, big-headed fish that kind of interacts with me. I'm looking at him right now. He's in the tank right in front of me, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him. But I've developed a relationship with that fish. These bigger fish, you give him a name. If you have 1,000 guppies and a couple of them die, and it's like, okay, I lost a few guppies. You have one big fish, and you name him, and you interact with him. You hand feed him. He follows your finger around. He becomes kind of like a pup. And certainly something like that can knock you backwards and make you consider possibly taking a break from the hobby. And that came up as one of the reasons under fish die-off. I imagine the value of fish. For example, I've had people tell me that they were on vacation and they had, let's say, in this one case I'm thinking of, the person was a saltwater fish keeper, and there was a power outage. He wasn't home, and at the end of the day, there were probably between $5,000 and $10,000 in fish and coral that was completely wiped out by the time he was able to get back home. And the person watching the tank, I mean, they basically just had feeding duty. They didn't know any of the scientific stuff that had to be looked at or that kind of thing. So now, certainly in a system like that, you'd expect to have backups, automatic, things that would kick in that would help save that. But certainly if you lost a tremendous value in fish, a lot of money loss, that would certainly make someone think twice. Another point that came up was time. And the time factor is interesting because, you get people that start adding tanks like I'm doing now. I mean, I'm adding tanks. I've got a stand behind me here that I'm going to be putting that rimless tank on, and I've got another 210-gallon tank that I'm in the middle of discussions about. And you start adding tanks, and you end up adding more than your time allows, or you added them and you had a change in life circumstances, like your job all of a sudden required more time, or you started a family. And so as you were adding these tanks, you had one child, a second child, a third child. Now you have, 45 tanks and 3 children, and you've got some real conflicts here because your time becomes extremely valuable, and you're starting to get the stink eye from your spouse because they think you're neglecting things that have to do with the family. And so you have all these moving parts, right? And I mean, for me, I left the hobby for years. I had a job where I was traveling 2 to 3 weeks at a time. I was like a fireman. I was like, living in the firehouse, and traveling around the country, and out, just not even available. And so it was impractical to have an aquarium. I had one of my sons keep an aquarium, and when he went off to other things, I ended up inheriting the aquarium and got back into the hobby that way. Just sort of timed up just right with me getting off the road. And but life circumstances, multiple tank syndrome, these things coming together can get a person to a point. I had one lady comment under the survey that she was experiencing burnout because her husband worked on a boat. I believe it might have been a tug of some kind, but he would leave for weeks at a time. And so she was never really that into fish, but he left the chores with her to take care of the tanks. And now when he comes home, he's so involved in the things that he needs to take care of in the short window of time that he's home that he can't really attend to so it sort of ended up on her lap. And she was just open in the comments. She just said, look, I'm burned out. I'm just burned out. So this is somebody that at some point is just going to tell their spouse, look, I'm putting it all on Craigslist. I'm giving away the fish. I'm done. And it would almost be understandable in those circumstances. So, life circumstances, time, overreaching. Someone decides to get into breeding. Okay, look, I want to breed fish. They don't realize that they're going to have waves of fry. So they're going to need additional tanks, and that these waves of fry are not going to be able to be kept in the same tank, because as some put on size, they'll now eat they'll eat the wigglers, or they'll eat the smaller ones. And so you're going to have more tanks and more tanks as more waves of fry come through. And all of a sudden they have 25 tanks and their third child on the way. So these things can, or a job change where now they have to travel. And so these things can come together, and a person says, forget it, I'm out. I'm going to put everything in storage, or I'm out of here. So another common one you see is the move and relocation, which of course, Denny, you relate to this. I mean, having to move fish in tanks. I recently did it in November. You either sell off everything, or you try and transport everything someplace and run into some difficulties, and then you have to start over again, starting from scratch. And some people don't make that transition. They move from one place to another, and the tanks never really get unpacked. They don't quite get back into it. And that can also be a reason why people leave the hobby. Knowledge was one of the points that actually surveyed a little higher than I thought, at 24%. And for a lot of us, and maybe you can relate to this, and if you can, go ahead and make a comment, but for a lot of us, we do our research after something has happened. In other words, we pick up a fish, we bring them home, the fish proceeds to suffer a bit, or maybe gets killed off by another fish, or something happens, and then the research starts. So it's a bit backwards for a lot of fish keepers. It certainly was for me in the beginning. I would do impulse purchases. A tank, a particular fish looks good. I'd bring it home, and then the problems start. Whether it was trying to keep the mabunas together, different lakes together, mabunas, peacocks, and haps all in one tank, in a smaller tank. Maybe it would work in a much larger tank, like a 200, 300, but certainly in a smaller tank, keeping these different lakes and fish needing different water parameters, it became a problem. Then I started researching it. It was after the fact, right? So somebody pointed out in the comments under the survey that in today's world, a lack of knowledge shouldn't be a problem because so much of it is out there. But also keep in mind that you also have bad information being passed along, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook or blogs or somebody at a fish store who didn't really know what they were talking about but didn't want to seem stupid, so they gave you advice that was wrong. You go home, you follow what they said, and you have a die-off, you have problems. And if you then, if it was too much for you, you just throw in the towel and go, forget about it. I'm not going to do that anymore. A lot of us, of course, are into impulse buying. I experienced some of that when I picked up the green tear. I mean, if you saw that video, the video about when I bought Verde, there's a part in the video where I talk about as the fish store fellow was putting Verde into the bag, I'm thinking to myself, where am I going to put this fish? He's far too big for any of the he would be too big of a tank mate for the fish that I have now. So where am I going to keep him until I have the right circumstances to move him to a bigger tank? And so it was one of those things where I'm rushing home and pulling filter media out of established tanks, throwing it into a mesh bag, throwing it into a filter, and setting up a 29, in a matter of minutes in order to have a place to put him. Do I regret that impulse buy? No, because I think he's a great fish, and I'm really glad I got him. But we impulse buy. Fish keepers are like kids. They go into a candy store and they go, whoa, man, I want that fish. And I've certainly done a lot of that. I've done it not just in a fish store. I've done it through mail order, where I've gotten a bunch of fish, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, a little bit of that happened with that large shipment I received from the channel sponsor, Cichlid Shack. And which I think I forgot to mention, but Cichlid Shack is a sponsor of the channel. And if you go to Cichlid Shack and you want to buy food like extreme food or fish, use the Shack Attack 10. Shack Attack 10. That gives you 10% off at the Cichlid Shack. And it's just the cichlidshack.com. He's always getting spectacular fish in, so check him out. Check him out. But at any rate, when I received all those fish from the Cichlid Shack, I mean, in hindsight, looking back on it, I probably should have had a 100-gallon plus aquarium ready to go. Instead of what I ended up doing, it was a bit stressful putting those fish in a 55. That more than likely contributed to some of the aggression because, of course, they're territorial, and if there's less territory, there's going to be more fights, and of course, there was more stress and battles, and that, along with the stress of traveling, going into a bag and being put on an airplane, all of that stress kind of came together, and I started to have some die-off, as well as some die-off from both disease and from aggression. So it was a bit of a difficult situation. So impulse buying and learning after the fact is, that being out of sequence instead of learn and then do. We blow up, and then we step back and go, okay, what's my takeaway? I've done too much of that, I think. So another point that somebody brought up, which I thought was interesting, which can knock a person backwards, and you don't, unless you're on YouTube or on social media, you probably wouldn't be aware of this, but there are some folks out there that can be very, very cruel. And I mean cold-blooded and cruel, and will make comments about your tank, your fish, the way you keep your tanks, some strategy you're considering, combination of fish, how, the decor, I mean, you name it. And rather than provide helpful advice, these folks, which we refer to them very often as trolls, they're very malicious. They're ill-intentioned. They're not trying to help, and they'll overwhelm a fish keeper with negative comments, including things like calling them an idiot or stupid, or you've got to be the stupidest fish keeper I've ever seen, or only an idiot would do that. Things like this, which, of course, like over at the Ben O apostrophe Cichlid, right? The Facebook group, which, by the way, if you're trying to join that group, be sure to answer all the questions, including will you follow the guidelines, or else the moderators don't let you in. And we hate to turn people away, but that's just one of the rules of the group. Ben O apostrophe Cichlid is the Facebook group, but we have zero tolerance for people jumping on top of other people because of something they've seen in their tank. We encourage that they offer advice, tips, help, but sometimes it is just really mean-spirited. Now, the other side of that coin is if you jump into social media, if you get onto YouTube, you post something on a forum, you post pictures or things of this nature, you've got to be a little thick-skinned, because there's going to be folks that are going to say stuff that isn't necessarily nice. And so there's two sides to that coin. And I tell people, look, don't get into the posting of pictures and video of your tank if you can't if you're very sensitive to criticism. That's something that you should think twice about, because unfortunately they're out there and we can't always monitor them immediately. And they'll say some stuff that's pretty harsh. And so the other thing that came up was burnout. Some people get burned out. They just get burned out. You know, when you first get into fish keeping and you go to a fish store, and I mean, I still feel this way, thank goodness. I go to a fish store and I'm like at an adult Disneyland. I mean, I love the colors. I love running into a fish that I've never seen before, the shapes. I love sneaking over to the saltwater side and looking at the corals and the different colors there. And I get pumped up. I get excited. It's very interesting to me. But sometimes, for a variety of reasons, whether it's life circumstances in general, someone has a sick relative, they're in the middle of a divorce, they lost their job, maybe they're into substance abuse of some kind, or who knows what's going on. They're just experiencing a general burnout. And with that burnout will come neglect of the aquarium. Work that they should do, that they can't quite discipline themselves to do. And bad things start to happen. The tank gets overrun with algae. The tank gets a spike in ammonia, or some fish dies and isn't removed because the tank isn't being looked at. That fish starts to rot and create a lot of ammonia and waste. So you get these burnout circumstances that can occur. And unless, somebody helps that person out, or they have some type of epiphany where they kind of get back into it, they're done. And that tank ends up on the curb, and nobody wants it because it's all crusted up and covered in algae and mineral buildup or whatever. So if it's lost its appeal, if I ever feel that way, I promise I'll disappear. I mean, I don't feel like I have to force myself to talk with you about fish or taking care of aquariums, because I love it. And I love going to fish stores. And if I can share my trips with you, I love doing that. If I ever lose that edge, I will probably go do something else, because it would become drudgery, to have to be doing something you don't want to do. And that happens. It happens. People get burned out on their job. They get burned out on things like relationships, friendships, marriages. They get burned out on everything. And so it's possible it can happen with fish. But very often that burnout is an accumulation of losses or setbacks. And those losses or setbacks have something to do with the person not doing the work to begin with. In other words, at some point in that person's fish keeping career, they stopped learning, they stopped educating themselves, and they became a bit lazy. Now, I'm not talking about the person who was pulled away because of a job or life circumstances requiring them to be in demanding more of their time. That kind of. I'm talking about a person who sits there having a beer and watching TV when they know that they should service their filters, but they don't. I'll get to it later, and I'll get to it later, and I'll get to it later. Turns into 3 months, and they have a polluted tank and dead fish, and not being able to do the work and just getting kind of lazy is also a big part of why people ultimately will say, well, fish keeping isn't for me. And another thing that does come up is, of course, the equipment. You can get a person that runs into a series of circumstances over the years. I've had people send me emails and they messages just telling me, look, I'm at my wit's end. I can't figure out why my canister filter continues to leak, or I can't get the noise to stop, or no matter what I do, I have perfect water parameters and my fish keep dying. There's something going on that is related to equipment, and a massive equipment failure, like an aquarium cracks. Maybe the person had their aquarium way off level, and one side, some of the seams were getting a lot of pressure more than the other seams. One of those seams ends up coming undone, and they go to where they have their tank, and the water's all over the floor, and the fish are all dead. These kinds of things. A person has a sump, and the pump fails, so there's no circulation. The heater is in the sump. The tank gets real cold because it's a cold room, and because there's no water circulation, the tank cools down, and a lot of fish. So equipment failure can also be a reason, even though it's more of an unusual one. With cichlid keepers, aggression can be a reason. And I've seen people, but aggression, usually it's been my experience that when there's a high amount of aggression, it usually results in the person not necessarily leaving the hobby, but switching to a less aggressive fish. And we saw that with half man, half cichlid. We saw it with My Wet Pets over in, I think, in Boston. A couple folks that were on YouTube, you'd see them on YouTube from time to time, were all about African cichlids, and now they're all about community tanks or South American cichlid. They've switched to a calmer type of fish because of the aggression. They didn't get necessarily out of it altogether. And of course, you have situations that are out of your control. I mean, you get the person who's in Houston and has a 3-day power outage, all his fish die, and the person goes, forget it, and they give up because I'm not starting over. I don't have the thousands of dollars to go out and restock my tanks. And again, should the person have had a backup? I guess, but who anticipates a 3-day power outage? I have one person that commented under the survey about how with COVID and the schools being shut down in his area, he had 3 aquariums in his classroom. He had to bring these 3 large aquariums to his home and has been taking care of the fish at home. And now he's got to transfer them back to the classroom when class. And he was like, he was in the middle of a burnout between being away from work and having to do all these, so burnout is definitely something. But let's take a look at what you folks have to say on this subject. I'm going to go into the chat here, and Let's see what you folks are talking about here. Fishman Marcus. Hey, Fishman Marcus. 135 watching. Thanks. 67 likes. Yeah, hit that, crush that like button. And did I miss any super chats while I was rambling on? Super chat is your way of being able to help the channel. Underneath the comment section is a way you can super chat. Those of you who've super chatted in the past, thank you so much for that support. It really helps. And Solar King Ronnie. Yeah, it gets crazy when start tumbling eggs. Always have to set up another tank. Yeah, I mean, you want to breed, you want to start breeding fish. Get ready for, look for that Petco $1 a gallon sale, right? Because you're going to need to have spare tanks. Let's see here. I'm scanning through the chat at the YouTube page, and all you see on your screen is the most recent chat. I'm going back. Yeah, someone suggested convict fish, and convict fish I heard breed like rabbits. They're like guppies, and they say if you get convict fish and they pair off, be sure to get like another 4 or 5 tanks because you're going to need them. Well, I was talking about super chatting, and it looks like somebody came in. Iman Fountain. Almost missed today, Ben. Love these chats. Thank you, Iman. And Iman, if you don't have stickers already, I think you do. But if you don't, send me an email. I'll get you a set of stickers out. And just send me your mailing address. And if you already have stickers and I've forgotten, I apologize. But yeah, you can do that to ben.o.cichlid@gmail.com. All right. So let's see here. Daniel Lopez comes in with a super chat. Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate that, my friend. Daniel's a big supporter of the channel. And I want to talk about something else that came up, and it came up with a friend of mine who is happens to also be a moderator of the channel. And this is something interesting and something that we don't often think about. And hey, Elijah. Thank you, Elijah. I appreciate that. Can you keep South American cichlids outside in the south in a pond year-round without heat? Money for your trip to Aquashella. Elijah, two things. First of all, I've been pricing out Aquashella and comparing to how much time I would spend there. And it looks like it would be about $1,000 for 2 days. So I'm not sure if I'm going to go, only because of budget, but just to be honest with you. And as much as I'd love to go. So I'm debating. I'm still kind of on the fence. My wife is behind me either way. She's looking at flights. She probably would love to have me out of her hair for a few days. Now, there are in the South, as you probably know, in the South, there are very well-known fish breeders that operate with outside ponds. The one, Imperial Tropicals over in Florida, massive ponds. One time he got wiped out with hurricanes. I mean, the ponds were gone. The water was blown out. Fish were wherever they landed on the property. It was horrible. But he operates outside, and there are folks even in the more central states like Tennessee that will have outside ponds, but those ponds have to be moved inside during the winter months. we had a spell here where we were in the teens, 10 degrees, 12 degrees I mean, it got real cold here for a couple of weeks. And we had like a foot or two of snow. I mean, my dogs were outside hopping like foxes, trying to catch mice. I mean, it was hilarious. But so if I'd had a outside pond, those fish would have died unless they were koi. But your fish like your South Americans, your African cichlids, they really need to be in that sweet spot, anywhere from 70 to 80. They need to be in that sweet spot. Sure, you can add heaters, I imagine, and probably be expensive, but that can be done. And so let's see here. I'm going back to the chat. Tony, I'm glad you're here. It's okay if you're late. We're not requiring a note from a parent anymore for people that are late. Jose Rivera, send me your address, my friend. I have I tell people, okay, if you super chat, you get stickers. And then somebody sends me their address that never super chatted, and I go, well, whatever. I'm too soft. Hey, Cat Sailor, thank you for that, my friend. I appreciate it. All right. So what I want to talk with you about is something that was brought up with me by GP. And GP had a situation where the tank boss died. And this is, let me get this survey out of here. This is something that that if you have a tank with territorial or aggressive fish, a tank boss can make the difference between a successful or a calm situation and absolute battle royale chaos. And over the years, I was very, very fortunate. I had Vinny, and Vinny was my 10-inch plus Venusis that is now living very happily in a very large tank in California. But he kept the peace in a 150-gallon aquarium that I had, and I had some very aggressive. I had a hawk, I had an eye biter, I had a very aggressive fire hap. I had a large, like a 9-inch trout. It's some very aggressive fish, very, very big, bulky fish that could inflict a lot of damage very quickly if they wanted to. He would get in the middle of fights. He would break up fights. It was real funny. It was like having an MMA referee. He would get in the middle of fights and break them up. He would get challenged from time to time. The trout made a run at him for about 5 seconds. The eye biter went after him and actually was in charge for like a day. And then Vinny kind of got his wits about him and realized that he was twice as heavy and ended up opening up a can of whoop ass on him and ended up taking over again. The eye biter as a boss would have been complete chaos. The eye biter would have kept everybody corralled in a corner and run the whole tank and just really harass everybody. When Vinny was boss, everybody could swim around fine, and Vinny would cruise around and peck at the substrate, and life was good. So with GP, with Govinder, he recently lost his tank boss. Very large fish they'd had for a very long time, died of old age, no doubt, for the number of years that he had him. And absolute chaos broke out. Not that different from what you see sometimes in human, international situations. You have Russia, running a tight rein over parts of Eastern Europe, and Russia pulls out, and all of a sudden these countries start killing each other. They start going at these old wars, start for dominance. But when this monster was on top of them, they all sort of kind of were low key. And well, you kind of see a microcosm of that in the aquarium, right? So, in the case of Vinny, we had this sort of benevolent dictator. I don't think Russia's a benevolent dictator, but Vinny was a benevolent dictator. In the case of GP, he had a benevolent dictator. He had somebody who'd run the tank, but in a peaceful fashion. Nobody messed with him. Nobody was going after each other. That fish died, and now he's got chaos. He's had a couple fish die. I mean, what do you do? What do you do when that happens? In the tank here to my right, I have what you would call a phoenix, which is a fish that is bred over at the Cichlid shack. Beautiful fish, and that fish seems to be the boss of my African cichlid tank. However, yesterday I noticed that the phoenix had some fin damage, and it looks like the Placidochromis johnsoni has realized that he's actually bigger than him and is not taking it anymore and is fighting back. And even my very, very timid bicolor 500 went after the phoenix. So there's a bit of a shift going on. Now, whoever ends up in charge, I hope, is better than the phoenix. The phoenix is not a good tank boss. The phoenix keeps the fish corralled at both ends of the tank and runs control over the middle of the tank. And so for me, that's not a fun tank to be viewing. So there is a part of me that is hoping that the phoenix will be bumped from the top spot. In the meantime, I'm getting in there and I'm moving things around. I'm taking this huge buildup of substrate. Somebody has been building these massive pits and moving massive amounts of substrate where it goes 5-6 inches up the side of the tank. I'm moving all that. I'm destroying those pits, moving stuff around in the hope that when it all sorts out, I've got a tank boss that's going to be a bit more benevolent than the phoenix. In the South American tank, it looks like the starry night, the tilapia pelini. Sometimes they call them blicaries, but I think the official name now has been established as the tilapia pelini, is actually the boss of that South American tank. I have seen fish like one of the red shoulder severums go after him, but for the most part, nobody messes with him. This is why I was contemplating putting him in with the African cichlids, because he'd probably be a good tank boss here. And but I mean, if he gets too violent with the South Americans, I'm going to have a problem. I'm thinking when I move those South Americans out to the 90-gallon, they're going to have a much bigger footprint. That tank is very deep, so it's going to have a lot of room and territory. It has a big floor plan. So if they're going to be claiming real estate, there's a lot of real estate in that tank to claim. So I'm thinking that what the Starry Night is going through right now will probably start to calm down when I put them all into that bigger tank. The African cichlids will probably end up in in either a 125 that I'm contemplating or a 200. There's a 210-gallon tank. I'm this close. It's a rimless, low iron tank, and we're this close in pulling the trigger on that thing. And that's going to, very often a larger tank can settle things down because there's less of a feeling of competition for territory and food. And what I told GP, my advice to GP was rearrange the tank, add hiding spaces, and keep a close eye on it. Some of the violence that's occurring, which can occur in a cichlid tank, is occurring at night when he's not looking. And that's very, very frustrating. You get up in the morning, you come down, you look at your tank, and there's 2 fish that are torn to shreds. And the night before, they were all swimming around. They all seemed okay. You were breathing a sigh of relief and thinking, okay, maybe things have finally settled down. You come into your aquarium room the next morning, you got 2 fish dead, eyes are eaten out, fins are shredded, and you feel terrible. So, GP, I wish you luck on this. This is not an easy situation to sort out. Short of going out and maybe buying a big, maybe contacting somebody like. I remember I got my big eye biter from Wonder of Cichlids, but you can probably get some big haps, a big Venusis, or a big living stone eye from maybe from James over at the Cichlid Shack. It might be worth the investment. But then, it's a roll of the dice. That fish might be a killer. I mean, look at my Eureka Red. I mean, that Eureka Red would instantly be the boss in my African cichlid tank. But he's the kind of boss that actually hurts other fish. He doesn't just become the boss and then pull back and cruise around and strut his stuff. He actually is a fish that seems to want to destroy other fish. I'm hoping that when I move these African cichlids to a bigger tank, the additional territory and the addition of other fish, because I'm going to time it so that I can get about 5 or 6 more cichlids from the Cichlid Shack, and then make a big move all at once. But changing decor, lower your temperature, take it down to 75, even 74. Keep a close eye on it, and maybe keep the lights out. But I'd say keep the lights out, but they seem to be killing each other in the dark. So I don't know if that's gonna help. Now, I did have one person tell me that putting them in complete darkness is not necessarily a good idea. And I started running a night light in the fish room. This light stays on all the time. See this thing here? This thing is just pointing upward, and there's always some kind of light in this room. It's never completely dark, and maybe that helps. I don't know. All I know is I haven't had any fish death. And was it the light, or was it the fact that I took out the Eureka Red, or was it? I mean, so many moving parts. I did lower the temperature, and that this tank runs at around currently it's 79 because of the weather, but I try and keep it around 78 ideally. Right now it's 79.2. At any rate, GP, I wish you luck, and it will pass. It will sort out. Don't get so dissuaded that you end up putting your tank in a bin on the curb, which I know you will not do. So, all right. So it looks like we're getting close to the hour here. Somebody says they want a better view of my tank during the stream. Which tank do you want to look at? Do you want to look at this one? There's my African cichlid tank. Are they swimming around? Let me take you in a little bit. Maybe they'll respond to my hand. Autopharynx tetrastigma is pretty amazing. Let's see if we can take a look at here's the South American tank. I just love that red spotted sebrum. There's the paratilapia coming out of his cave. He usually hangs out in the cave on the right side. He adopted that cave. The second I put it in, that became his home. There he goes. One of the things I love about these caves by underwater galleries, you put them in the tank and you realize which fish like caves. And, some fish will ignore them altogether, but the fish that adopts the cage, like in this case, the paratilapia, you can see him there hanging out. So that's really cool for him. It gives him a sense of calmness and security that normally would not have been available. You see the severums. The severums hang out in the back corners. The green, the red shoulder severums. Geophagus are all over the place. I don't know where the viejas are. The viejas are probably hiding in the corner. They don't like it when I turn the lights on, the bright lights. I can't show you Vinny because he's in a position where he's in a place where I can't really turn the equipment around. But I might be able to show you. Let me see if I can get the camera angle. I don't know if I can get that much. Let's see. Risk of moving the at the risk of moving the I better not. Yep. But that's where the red Jake. So here, how about if I show you more tank? There you go. How's that? Is that okay? So more tank and less Ben. Put myself a little bit in the frame. Okay. So with that being said, let's go ahead and pick up a couple more comments, and then we'll go ahead and start to wrap this up. But let's take a look at it looks like I missed a super chat here. Let's see. Elijah, I got you, and I thank you for that, my friend. Cat Sailor, thank you so much for that. Robert Hadnot. Robert, thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. And let's see here. Anthony DeStefano. Anthony DeStefano. Good morning, Ben. I thank you and other subscribers for the knowledge. I enjoy the hobby. New to it about 5 months now. Anthony, I love hearing that kind of comment. That's the kind of comment that keeps me fired up and tells me that we're actually reaching people and helping them, which is, as I mentioned earlier, that is my purpose in doing this. I just love watching new fish keepers accumulate a series of wins and victories that keep them going in the hobby. Sean says my vieja would have made the worst tank boss, killed my GT. Wow. Must have been bigger than that green terror. Right away, went after every fish that went near him. Wow. Decided to break that setup. Yeah, I can understand that. Catching Solar King Ronnie. What kind of cichlids were they? They must have been catching. I mean, cichlid is a very big family. Let's see here. I'm running through the comments here, and Terry Spelling. Thank you so much, Terry, for that. I'd love new stickers. How many people in here would share tank videos? I would love for small channels to get more views. I love to see more fish. Terry, I probably have it on file, but send me your address, and I will certainly send you a set of stickers. And I'm going to be appearing on a couple channels, a couple very small channels, or moderate and small channels in the next month or so. I'm going to be making like an appearance and promoting those channels. I'm all with you. I mean, let's get these small channels up and successful and running and doing well. Tony says, Tony Cancellieri, sorry, it is probably a very stupid question, and my philosophy is not really such a thing as a stupid question, but let me see here. I think a fish of mine died because of me slamming the cabinet door too hardly. Can a fish die of something similar? Yeah, I mean, they have internal organs. My guess would be more of the more likely an impact against something might have caused organ damage. Unfortunately, sometimes you see swim bladder damage and the fish will start swimming very weird or upside down. I've even heard that fish can knock themselves out. They can knock themselves unconscious. And so maybe he was unconscious. You threw him out too fast. I hope not. It's horrible. Horrible humor. But yeah, I have heard they can have organ failure. I mean, they have organ failure when they get old. They have disease. Certain things, functions in their body when they get older, stop functioning. That's why they start looking run down. They're not, producing color or replacing scales and things of this nature. Their eyes become a little cloudy, and as they get older, right, they start to function differently. So they probably have some of the issues that any living organism has. Can their heart stop suddenly from fright? I don't know. I'm definitely not a veterinarian, but I imagine. So at any rate, I think we're on the hour. I don't want to use up too much of your weekend, but I want to thank all of you for tuning in. You folks really are the best. Thank you to my super chatters. Thank you to my moderators. Thank you to my channel sponsors. Thank you to Super Cichlids, to the Cichlid Shack, Underwater Galleries. Let me see here. Elite Cichlids, Hager, all these folks. I always forget a few of them. But mostly thank you to you folks. You folks are the best. I appreciate you spending some of your Saturday with me. And on that note, we will go ahead and end off. And I will see you folks next week. And tune in. I'm going to try and have it tomorrow, but I'm not sure if I can get to the editing because it's a lot of content. I paid a visit to Glass Cages here in Nashville. I paid a visit to Glass Cages, and what I saw there was completely unexpected. And a lot of what I saw has nothing to do with making aquariums. I came home with a fish, and he's in the tank right here next to me in a 10-gallon, and he's going into a cave as I speak, a fish I've been looking for, and maybe you can guess what that fish is, and you'll see him in the video, or maybe I'll introduce him to you somewhere else, like on Instagram. If you want to follow me on Instagram, go to ben.o.cichlid, ben.o.cichlid on Instagram. The same as my email address, right, at gmail.com. So look for my tour of Glass Cages. It is like nothing you've ever seen before, I assure you. And a lot of it has nothing to do with aquariums. Only in Tennessee. All right, my friends, thank you so much. And thank you for tuning in. You are the best. And that's it. That's it for me.